Go to our first discussion for today. President Bola Tinubu has signed the 54.99 trillion naira 2025 appropriation bill into law. The 2025 budget is 99.96% higher than the 2024 budget of 27.5 trillion naira. The president signed the budget with principal officers of the National Assembly and other top government officials present at the ceremony in his office at the State House, Abuja. The bill was approved by National Assembly on the 13th of February after revisions to President Bola Tinubu's initial budget proposal of 49.7 trillion naira. A breakdown of the budget for 2025 includes a total expenditure of 54.9 trillion naira, statutory transfer of 3.65 trillion naira, and a recurrent non-debt expenditure of 13.64 trillion naira. This increase reflects additional anticipated revenues from agencies such as the Federal Inland Revenue Service, the Nigerian Customs Service. During the signing, President Tinubu talked about the economic indicators that shows his necessary economic reforms are beginning to yield results. For further analysis of the 2025 fiscal spending plan, I have a senior economist at Stears, Dumebi Oluwole. She's joining me via Zoom to continue this conversation. Dumebi, it's good to see you on the program this afternoon.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, I think we should start with, of course, this spending plan. Ambitious one, like everyone would say. 99% higher than what we had in 2024. First, let me allow you, what is your take with regards to the assumptions, projections, and all around this spending plan for 2025?
So starting with the assumptions, I would say we all know that they are pretty ambitious assumptions. The targets in the budget are very ambitious, but then again, they're not too far-fetched when you consider some of the data reconstruction that is going on currently with the inflation rebasing, or that's the CPI rebasing rather, and the GDP rebasing, right? But we also put all those numbers coincided with the current reforms that are currently being undertaken, right? So the tax reforms, for instance, the expectation is that will significantly contribute to these revenue projections that the government is planning to make and how they do intend to spend. But more importantly for me would be the core of what the budget is saying, and that is the priority of the federal government, right? How do they plan to spend Nigeria out of what Nigeria is currently facing? And not only that, how do they intend to sustain the growth that Nigeria is supposed to be experiencing and eventually reduce price pressures, right? So we do see that they are prioritizing capital expenditure, which is a good thing. Noting that with capital expenditure, we're going to expect more road infrastructure, possibly rail infrastructure, things that will be eventually able to support productivity across businesses, right? And a pointer to this is one of the foremost leading indicators that we use to gauge GDP or business activities, which is PMI. And we have seen that be sustained at the expansion level that is around 50 points and over, right? So in its entire essence, right, the budget is the core of the message is we're trying to spend to ensure that the economy grows, right? And I think that's one of the things that we will take. Now, whether or not the inflation numbers or the inflation projections or targets are realistic, I'd say that we'll leave that conversation for another time, because as the year goes by, we'll be able to determine how much people are uplifted from the current living costs that they're experiencing. And I'll say same goes as well for the exchange rate. The CBN is significantly doing its bit, but not until we do see a significant increase in our foreign exchange inflows that we'll see the 1,500 naira, budget benchmark be sustained at least till the end of the year.
Brilliant start, I must say, and happy Women's, it's your month, so I wish you happy celebrations. Yeah, so let's look at the capital expenditure and some of this spending, the spending by government. Many would say there should be some specific interventions now to address the fallout of the challenges that we've seen with the implementation of the reforms yes, we're getting out of it. We've seen GDP figures looking pretty good. Like you also alluded to it, the FX market is getting some stability. But what sort of specific interventions are you looking at moving forward?
I mean, of course, when we take up reforms, or not even when we take reforms, when any economy takes up reforms, the expectation is that they do make provisions for social social welfare to help the most vulnerable, in the country and in the society, at least live through that entire process. Right now, Egypt is even undertaking one ahead of the Ramadan, fasting. And the expectation is that Nigeria should be able to do that, right? We do expect that with all of the reforms that has taken place, with tax reforms also coming in more strongly, I think those are going to be taking up a lot more from the middle of the year, by second half of the year. So we do think that it's extremely important. Those social transfers, those conditional transfers to the most vulnerable households in Nigeria, which we do know are more resident between the north and southwestern parts of Nigeria, and also some parts of the east as well. We know that people necessarily need this support. The government has done a good job by increasing the minimum wage, but the issue with that is most of the companies, which are small to medium scale enterprises that will be paying that amount of money, have been the hardest hit through the reforms. So the ability to meet up with that will be very difficult, especially for them, especially when we're looking at it in terms of scalability and sustainability, right? Because the goal now is that they're able to produce as much. And right now, the economy is not yet at that point where they will thrive so much to be able to do that. So basically, in terms of support, number one, social transfers, conditional transfers, and unconditional transfers to the most vulnerable in society, and making sure that we do it in the most transparent way. The government has to do it in the most transparent way. So the National Cash Register, all the names of people that are going to be involved in that, is important that we know those people. It's important that we know how many they are. It's important we know the states that they are most resident in. It's important that we know the number of people in their households. So for instance, are they a household of 4? Are they a household of 5? What's our benchmark for earmarking this money to them, and how much are we earmarking to them every month or every day? So how are we transferring the monies to them? Digitally, are we giving them through cash? It's extremely important so that policy analysts will be able to, understand how much of an impact this is going to have on the economy, because there are consequences, especially if we pump in so much cash into the economy without ensuring that we do it in a way that will be sustainable. Then the other aspect of it is supporting these businesses that should be employing this most vulnerable in the society. And like I said, the small to medium scale enterprises across the real sector. And across the real sector, we're looking at services, we're looking at services, particularly trade, because trade does account for about 16% of Nigeria's employment. Then you look at agriculture, so supporting farmers, and then supporting farmers and the entire agri sector value chain, and then looking at the manufacturing sector. So because those are the sectors that are able to absorb a lot more of Nigeria's labor force. So I'll say those are the two kinds of supports that I would expect with these reforms.
Debt service is also something very worrisome, and particularly the fact that we're expecting the revised GDP figures from the NBS that's considering the rebased GDP. Yes, I think I got it right there. So now many are worried that if that comes up, the debt to GDP ratio and all of that, these figures, you are the economist here, might start to, the country might want to get to learn more and all of that. How worried are you about debt service and about our present state of debt as a country?
I'd say it is obviously concerning, right? With the rate at which debt has increased, and the fact that most of this debt that has increased has been external debt. So we know that that's pretty concerning, especially when you look at the fact that the naira, has been devalued over the last year, right? So it's definitely going to be more expensive to service that debt. And there's obviously, like you rightly said, that problem, that illusion that with GDP rebasing, our budget deficit, our fiscal deficit to GDP ratio will be significantly below the threshold, and then it gives room for additional borrowing. But we've also seen that the federal government is trying to, federal government and the CBN, or both, let's just say say policy authorities across board are trying to leverage more on revenue generation. That's one, which is a good thing. And the second one is they're trying to leverage more on domestic debt sources, right? So we do expect that there will be some balance. There is still that concern, right, of debt being unsustainable over the next couple of years with how fast it is rising. But I mean, with investors being on the lookout for Nigeria, with the international community, literally being on Nigeria, I think that the government will want to tread carefully, and they should tread carefully when it comes to ramping up or gulping so much debt. And I think one other thing to point to here is that we have seen the trend of African countries venturing back into the international debt market. And we think that that is something that we should be on the lookout for. Nigeria has done two already. I'm sorry, one last year with the Eurobond issuance. Whether or not another one is going to happen, it's quite unclear now. But we know that leveraging domestic market is something that the federal government will definitely want to rely on. We saw the domestic dollar bond issuance. So debt instruments of that sort will be what we expect the government to somewhat resort to. So it would just be a thing of the quality and the kinds of investors or creditors that the federal government will reaching out to, and how they do intend to, repay those debts as the years go by, because we do not want a resurfacing of ways and means advancing.
You commended the CBN with regards to how they've been able to manage the FX market, and this commendation has been coming from all quarters. But I would ask you, sustainability of this is key because we still try to drive down the greenback so that our currency can have the kind of strength that we want. So two in one, what do you make of that sustainability from that space, and what more do you think the Apex Bank needs to do at this time to achieve this price stability that we always talk about?
Yeah, again, thank you for reiterating the commendation to the CBN, and it's because it's indeed worth commending. We think that, or I think that the CBN has done a substantial work with how they've been trying to manage Nigeria's forex markets and general monetary policy state. So their orthodoxy has really instilled into the market's confidence, and the expectation is that that's going to continue. The fact that reserves have been depleting pretty quickly is one of the pointers as to this sustainability that you're making mention of. And I think that the CBN will do what needs to be done to ensure that we bring in more dollar inflows into the country to sustain their efforts, right? But to help situate it properly, the first aspect of this is we need more dollar inflows into the country. And that is not within the purview of the central bank. That rests within fiscal authorities. And remember, we have four key sources of foreign exchange or capital inflows into Nigeria: oil, crude oil, non-oil exports, remittances, and foreign investments, which includes FDI and FPIs. For the first, which is oil, we do know that we have been seeing slight upticks in crude oil production, but that has to significantly increase to ensure that Nigeria is able to generate as much dollars in the economy through oil exports. And remember, we're in a fragile global economy now, where the chances of global oil prices reducing is quite high because the US is planning to ramp up production. And what this means is that Nigeria has to produce a lot more to leverage crude oil prices. And it's also quite complex because we do have an OPEC quota, right? So the expectation is that the government, or the important thing here is that we need to make sure that we increase our production. If negotiations with OPEC has to happen for this to be so, then we need to start having those conversations to ensure that we increase our production, because Nigeria is more sensitive to changes in oil production than prices, and that significantly impacts our foreign exchange reserves, which oil revenue accounts for over 50% of. Then we have non-oil exports. If productivity is still a problem, where our manufacturing, our services, and agriculture are not producing enough to export enough to generate substantial capital inflows, that will still be a problem for us. And then the remittance inflows, we are already seeing the diaspora community being engaged constantly with the central bank and also the federal government. The central bank is doing what they can, but for that confidence to be significantly instilled, the fiscal authorities have to do their part. Nigerians in diaspora need to believe that the economy is sustainable enough to bring in that money. And until they're encouraged substantially, we're already seeing those remittance inflows increase and pick up, but they can be more. And the final part of this is investment inflows, FPI and FDIs. What the central bank is doing in terms of keeping interest rates elevated or at least stable enough to keep attracting investors into the economy, short-term investors, has been working so far. Over the last couple of months and compared to last year and even 2023, we have seen FPI inflows almost triple. So the expectation is that with interest rates remaining as elevated, that will still keep coming in. But to bring in the long-term capital that we need substantially, the federal government has to do their part. So again, like I said, while there is work to be, while the CBN is doing what they can do, there's a lot more work for the federal government to do in terms of this sustainability. And on the part of keeping the naira stable and how this is going to eventually boil down, we think that there is the ripple effect or negative side of it, where if reserves continue to deplete and we do not see a significant increase or inflow of reserves, there will be problems with speculation and arbitrage opportunities in the market if people expect that the naira is going to, depreciate soon.
Yeah.
Again, the chances of that happening right now is pretty slim.
Finally, before I let you go, some little good news. Price of foodstuff in the market is beginning to reduce, and everyone is talking about it. It's some good news. Yeah, let me see. How does that come to you? And Nigerians are expecting more. They still want these prices to drop, of course.
Yes, I mean, that's obviously good news to anyone. I'm going to the market to buy commodities at really affordable or at affordable prices is what people definitely look forward to. And that is how, the common man or the average Nigerian will know that things are working at the top, right, in terms on a policy level. Yeah. Remember that commodity prices are cyclical, right? The seasonality that's at play here, and there are times where prices increase. So, for instance, the Ramadan period, because of the fasting, we do know that commodity prices are beginning to pick up again, right? So, until we begin to address some of those issues with agricultural productivity, like storage, to ensure that peak demand periods like this, we're able to ensure that there's enough supply and prices do not become astronomical. There's still a lot more work to be done, but I mean, there's a temporary reprieve and people are excited about it.
Dumebi Oluwole, thank you so much, Senior Economist, Stears. Thank you for starting the week with us on the show, and wish you Happy International Women's Month. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.